Athena's apartment was a quiet refuge from the city's relentless noise. A small one-bedroom sanctuary perched on the fifth floor of a tired building. The walls were a pale shade of cream, cracked in places where years had etched their story. Few houseplants clung stubbornly to life on the windowsill, and stacks of well-thumbed books teetered precariously on every surface. Morning light filtered in softly through threadbare curtains, casting a gentle glow on the chipped mug in Athena's hand. It was the same mug she had clung to for years, its cracked handle a familiar weight in her palm, its worn blue rim a small comfort in a world that often felt too vast, too loud. The scent of freshly ground coffee curled in the air, mingling with the faintest trace of vanilla from a candle that flickered softly on the kitchen counter. Outside her window, the city thrummed with life. Distant horns blared, footsteps echoed on concrete, and the murmur of countless conversations wove an invisible tapestry of human stories. But inside Athena's apartment, time slowed. Here, in this modest cocoon, she found her peace. Neighbors passed through the dimly lit hallways with polite nods and brief hellos. Mrs. Patterson from 3B complained occasionally about noises that didn't exist. Jake from downstairs blasted his music a little too loudly on weekends, and Maria Rodriguez across the hall was the kind of neighbor who made extra tamales just to share. Athena liked the quietness between these interactions, the gentle rhythm of routine that allowed her to exist without fuss or spotlight. She was a ghost in the building's fabric, seen but not scrutinized. But last night something unexpected slipped beneath her door. A cream-colored envelope, thick and heavy in her hand, bore her name in elegant script, Miss Athena. Inside was a wedding invitation, Lisa Rodriguez's wedding. Athena stared at the delicate paper, as if it held some secret language she was only just beginning to understand. The invitation was a tangible thread, pulling her toward a world she had long kept at arm's length, a world of celebration, community, and belonging. For a moment a smile played at the corners of her lips. Maybe they ran out of people, she mused softly, a dry chuckle escaping. She pictured the glamorous guests she'd heard about, the tailored suits, the sparkling gowns, the glittering jewelry, and felt the weight of her own simple life settle over her like a familiar cloak. The navy blue dress tucked in the back of her closet, purchased years ago for an interview she never landed. The modest kitchen towel she planned to wrap as a gift. The quiet hope that, for one afternoon, she might step out of the shadows and into a place where she was seen. Athena had lived here 3 years, long enough to know the rhythms of the building but not enough to feel fully part of its stories. Maria's kindness was a lifeline, a reminder that small acts could mean everything. Carlos's help with her groceries was a rare moment of connection, in a world where loneliness often whispered in the silence. And Lisa, the girl next door with bright eyes and soft laughter, was about to start a new chapter, yet Athena carried her own stories, locked away beneath layers of silence. Memories of loss and quiet strength, of choosing solitude over scrutiny. She didn't talk much about her past. Why invite questions when answers often brought more pain? Her life was simple by choice and necessity, a careful balancing act between staying visible enough to belong and invisible enough to protect herself. She turned the invitation over in her hands, feeling the slight texture of the embossed letters. "Me at a wedding," she whispered. "With my old dress and kitchen towels, who would have thought?" But beneath the self-deprecating humor lay something fragile and precious, a flicker of belonging she hadn't dared to feel in years. And with that flicker, a quiet resolve took root. Athena would go. Athena stood before the grand entrance of Grand View Manor, the wedding venue gleaming like a palace carved from dreams, White stone arches framed perfectly manicured gardens where roses bloomed defiantly despite the early autumn chill. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway, sleek, black and silent sentinels of wealth. For a moment Athena hesitated. The polished marble steps stretched upward like a barrier, separating her from a world that felt both dazzling and alien. She adjusted the strap of her navy dress, feeling the weight of its simplicity against the opulence around her. Inside, crystal, chandeliers spilled golden light over vaulted ceilings and walls hung with priceless art. Waiters glided silently, offering flutes of champagne that sparkled like captured stars. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and expensive perfumes, a scent Athena didn't know how to wear. She walked carefully, a quiet ripple amid the tide of impeccably dressed guests. Women in gowns that seemed spun from starlight whispered in. Soft clusters, their laughter delicate yet sharp like crystal breaking. Men in tailored suits exchanged greetings with measured smiles and firm handshakes that spoke of boardrooms and power plays Athena had only glimpsed from afar. Her eyes caught a flash of Lisa, radiant in burgundy silk, her smile a beacon of genuine joy. Lisa waved, and Athena returned the gesture with a small, hopeful smile. Yet the warmth felt distant, like sunlight behind a pane of glass. The first pang of self-consciousness twisted inside Athena's chest. The simple kitchen towel she carried felt absurd beside gifts wrapped in silk and silver boxes heavy with ribbons. She imagined the whispered judgments already swirling. Who invited her? That gift? Really? A soft voice inside her, mine, whispered, "You don't belong here." Athena clenched her jaw, willing the voice to retreat. She reminded herself of the invitation's promise, that she was not invisible today. Her gaze drifted upward, catching sight of Helen, the mother of the groom. Helen stood near the bar, statuesque and imposing, her gray hair swept perfectly into a regal chignon. Her dress was a masterpiece of silk and subtle shimmer, her jewelry understated yet unmistakably valuable. Helen's eyes flicked over the crowd, sharp and calculating, then settled on Athena. There was a pause, an unspoken verdict conveyed in a single glance that cut deeper than any words could. Athena felt the heat rise to her cheeks. A whisper of a smirk played at Helen's lips as she turned to her companion, murmuring something that sent a ripple of suppressed laughter through the nearby group. Athena caught fragments. Practicality. Out of place. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the moment. "You're here for Lisa," she reminded silently, "not for them." Still, as Athena moved toward the guest book, the weight of the gilded frames and glass walls seemed to press closer. The room, though beautiful, felt like a gilded cage. She signed her name carefully, each stroke deliberate, a quiet assertion of presence. Around her, conversation swirled. Talk of vacation homes in the Hamptons, charity galas, new business, ventures. Words floated over her like drifting smoke, beautiful yet intangible. A man passed by, his cologne sharp and commanding. Athena caught his brief glance, a flicker of curiosity quickly masked by polite disinterest. She wondered for a moment if anyone truly saw her at all. A faint smile curved her lips as she thought of the absurdity. Here she was, in the middle of a room full of grandeur, holding a modest gift and wearing an old dress that smelled faintly of lavender detergent. The contrast was stark, almost comical. "Maybe they think I'm a mistake," she mused with quiet humor, the punchline of their perfect party. Yet beneath the humor lay a steady pulse of determination. Athena had come not to impress, but to witness, to be part of a story bigger than her own silence. The first chords of the ceremony began to stir the room's attention. Athena took a breath, stepping toward her seat, unaware that the woman with the silver hair had already made her judgment, and that today, the glass walls would begin to tremble. The grand hall buzzed with polite laughter and the clinking of glasses, but beneath the sparkling surface, Athena sensed a tide turning, a current of quiet judgment that shifted with every sideways glance and half-spoken word. Her presence, once barely noticed, was now a subject of whispered conversations, flickering eyes, and barely concealed disdain. Helen's subtle smirk had opened a door, and through it slipped the shadows of suspicion and exclusion. As Athena took her seat toward the center of the room, the weight of invisible eyes pressed upon her like an unseen cloak. Conversations hushed as she passed, then resumed with a sharper edge. "She doesn't quite fit," one voice muttered, just loud enough to catch Athena's ear. "Did someone say she brought kitchen towels?" another whispered, dripping with thinly veiled sarcasm. A woman's eyes narrowed, fixed on Athena's modest gift on the table, a stark contrast to the ornate crystal vases and leather-bound photo albums arrayed nearby. Athena felt the sting but held her gaze steady. The room's soft murmur was a tide threatening to pull her under, but she anchored herself with a steady breath. Inside, her mind spiraled, a stream of memories threading through the present moment like ghosts at a feast. She saw herself as a child, watching from the window as laughter echoed from a home she had long left behind. The silence that followed had taught her lessons too harsh for her young heart. Lessons about being unseen, unheard, and uninvited. Her lips twitched in a rueful smile, recalling the small ironies of life. The luxury she'd never known, the family she'd chosen not to remember, and the quiet dignity she clung to like a lifeline. "You think you know someone by their dress or their gift?" Athena's thoughts whispered back at the murmurs. "You see a shadow, and call it nothing." The hum of conversation carried on, but Athena felt as if she were swimming through fog. Voices distorted, faces blurring at the edges. She reached for the comfort of a small silver ring on her finger, a relic from a past love, its cold weight, a reminder that even broken things could hold meaning. Across the room, Lisa glanced toward her mother, Helen, tension tightening the lines of her face. The bride's smile faltered for a heartbeat, caught between loyalty and discomfort. Nearby, Maria watched Athena with concern, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. Yet even Maria's kindness felt fragile against the tide of exclusion. Athena's chest ached. Not from the murmurs, but from the reminder that belonging was sometimes a cruel privilege, reserved for those born into it. She closed her eyes briefly, the sound of a distant piano filling the room with melancholy notes. "This is not your world," a voice inside warned, but Athena would not retreat, not today. The shadows lengthened as Helen's gaze swept once more, icy and deliberate. A whispered exchange between Helen and her companions carried a venom that slipped through the cracks. "She's a charity case. She doesn't understand class." Athena's fingers curled into a fist beneath the table, nails biting into her palm. The room seemed to tilt, the air thick with unspoken verdicts. Yet amid the whispers and shadows, a quiet defiance bloomed inside her. A slow, steady flame refusing to be extinguished. Because Athena knew the truth beneath the gilded frames. Worth was never measured by wealth or status. It was measured by resilience, by kindness, by the courage to stand, even when the world whispered you to fall. And so, as the music swelled and the ceremony drew near, Athena lifted her chin, ready to face whatever storm awaited behind the glass walls. The reception hall had grown heavy with a silence that screamed, louder than any conversation. Athena stood near the gift table, her eyes fixed on the newlyweds as they shared their first dance. a fragile moment of joy shimmering against the undercurrents of tension. Then Helen appeared. Her approach was swift and deliberate, a queen descending her court. The subtle curl of her lip was no longer amused, but sharp, an edge honed by years of entitlement and privilege. Her eyes locked onto Athena's modest gift, then traveled upward to the navy dress, to the quietly poised figure standing too, confidently for her liking. "Excuse me." Helen's voice cut through the murmurs, loud and cold. Heads turned, champagne glasses paused mid-air. "I couldn't help but notice your contribution to the gift table," she said, gesturing disdainfully toward Athena's kitchen towels. "Kitchen towels, really?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm, so thick it tasted bitter in the air. "At a wedding like this?" Athena's heart hammered, cheeks flushing crimson. She swallowed the lump rising in her throat and managed, "It's practical. Something the couple could use." Helen laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that echoed off the chandeliers. "Practical? How quaint. Do you even know the value of the other gifts? The crystal vase alone? Worth more than you could earn in a year." Whispers rippled like a disturbed pond. Athena felt the room's eyes boring into her, weighing her worth as if it were something to be measured in dollars and cents. Then came the words that cut deeper than any knife. "Someone like you." A hush fell. Athena's hand rose instinctively to her cheek as a sharp burning sting exploded across her skin. The slap rang through the room, a gunshot in the midst of whispered judgments. For a suspended moment, time fractured. The music died. Faces froze in shock and disbelief. Athena's head snapped to the side, her cheek aflame with fire and humiliation. The world blurred as she tried to steady her breath, her eyes seeking any sign of support. Lisa's face appeared across the crowd, pale and horrified. Daniel's brow furrowed, lips pressed tight with embarrassment, yet neither moved. Maria pushed forward, fury blazing in her eyes, but the crowd parted too slowly. Helen stood tall, chest heaving with the thrill of her public display, satisfied that her message had been delivered with cruel clarity. "You didn't belong here," Helen hissed, voice cold and venomous. "And now you've made a spectacle of yourself." Athena's gaze locked with Helen's, steady, unyielding. "You have no idea who you're talking to," Athena said quietly, voice low but unwavering. Helen's laugh was sharp, but something flickered beneath her confidence. A crack in the armor. Athena reached into her purse, her fingers moving with deliberate calm. She found the number she needed. "Michael," she spoke clearly, the name cutting through the silence like a blade. "I need security at Grandview Manor. Now." The room held its breath, the air thick with anticipation. The first tear slid down Athena's cheek, not from pain, but from the fierce ember of defiance burning in her soul. The murmur of whispers lingered in the air like a heavy fog as Athena stood still, her cheek burning and her breath steady. Around her, the reception hall had shifted. The fragile veneer of civility cracked open to reveal raw tension simmering beneath. Guests glanced nervously between one another, unsure whether to intervene, to step back, or simply watch. The silence stretched, taut and fragile, until the distant sound of engines rolling over the driveway shattered it like a gunshot. Through the tall windows, Athena glimpsed the sleek black SUVs easing into position, their tinted windows reflecting the golden light of the chandeliers within. The room seemed to hold its breath, the unspoken anticipation palpable. Moments later, the grand double doors swung open, admitting a group of 6 men in black suits, moving with the precise synchronization of an elite force. They fanned out instantly, planting themselves strategically around the hall, a living perimeter of calm authority. Then, as if stepping from the shadows of another world, Michael entered, tall and commanding, with silver threading through dark, hair like the first frost on autumn leaves. He moved with a quiet confidence that needed no proclamation. His tailored suit hugged a frame accustomed to control, not the boastful power of the loud, but the absolute certainty of the unshakable eyes. And the room turned, drawn magnetically toward him. Conversations dwindled into silence. Champagne glasses froze mid-air, and even the chandeliers seemed to dim, bowing to his presence. Helen, mid-sentence as she recounted her triumph to an eager audience, faltered. Her smile waned, confusion flickering across her face like a candle guttering in a sudden draft. Michael's gaze swept the room, sharp and calculating. He found Athena immediately, the faint blush still coloring her cheek, the quiet fire burning in her eyes, and his expression softened just a fraction, a shield against the storm that had just passed. Then, with deliberate calm, he turned to face the gathering crowd. "Good evening," Michael began, his voice low but carrying unmistakable command. "I apologize for interrupting this celebration, but I understand there was an incident involving my wife." The word wife rippled through the hall like a wave breaking over still water. Faces shifted, judgments paused mid-thought. Helen's eyes widened, the connection catching her like a sudden chill. "Wife?" she stammered, voice cracked and incredulous. "That's impossible. She's nobody. She doesn't belong here." Michael's calm did not waver. Instead, his voice grew colder, firmer. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Michael Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries." The name landed in the room like a weight, settling over the crowd with undeniable force. Sterling Industries, a titan of industry, a colossus whose reach spanned from skyscrapers to media empires, a name synonymous with wealth measured in billions. Michael stepped closer to Athena, his hand finding hers, a quiet but unbreakable bond in the eye of the storm. "This is my wife, Athena Sterling," he said clearly, "the woman you felt entitled to assault in front of witnesses." The silence that followed was deafening. Helen's face drained of color, disbelief twisting into dawning horror, as the magnitude of her actions began to sink in. Athena chose quiet life. Michael continued, voice steady and filled with something deeper than authority. Respect. She values simplicity over showiness, kindness over cruelty, authenticity over pretense. These are qualities I cherish, and why I married her in a private ceremony 3 years ago. His words hung in the air, a rebuke to the room's arrogance and prejudice. "But make no mistake," he added, voice sharpening. "Her modesty does not make her less than anyone here. If anything, it makes her better than most." Helen's lips trembled, searching for words that would not come. "You did not know her worth," Michael said softly, "so you judged her by the surface. You assumed she was beneath you, without understanding the strength beneath the silence." His gaze swept the room again, locking eyes with several guests who now avoided his stare. "What happened tonight was not merely an assault. It was a public humiliation born of prejudice and ignorance. My legal team will be in touch to pursue both criminal charges and civil suit." The room shifted. The guests who had whispered in complicity now edged away, the masks of polite society slipping to reveal discomfort, regret, or fear. Lisa appeared at Athena's side, tears shining in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never imagined—" Athena squeezed her hand gently. "This isn't your fault," she replied softly. "Today was about her, not us." Helen, desperate and defeated, tried once more to salvage the situation. "Please," she pleaded, voice cracking. We can resolve this privately. Michael's expression hardened. Final. Privacy ended when you assaulted my wife in public, he said. Actions have consequences. And tonight karma had arrived at Grandview Manor. The room had emptied, but the echoes lingered. Ghosts of whispered judgments and fractured glances that refused to fade. Athena sat alone in a quiet corner of the grand hall, the gentle hum of the distant piano wrapping around her like a fragile shield. Her cheeks still throbbed with a dull ache, but it was the weight inside her chest, the memories, the solitude, that pressed heaviest. She closed her eyes, letting the noise of the world fall away until only the cadence of her own breath remained. Why did I choose silence? The question hovered in the shadows of her mind, fragile yet persistent. Her thoughts drifted back to a smaller apartment years ago, where laughter once filled the walls before it was replaced by cold silence. A family fractured, a love lost, to whispers of betrayal and the heavy burden of expectations unmet. In those years, Athena had learned to retreat, not out of fear, but necessity. Words, she realized, could wound sharper than any slap, and silence was sometimes the only armor. Left, she remembered the faces of those who had turned away, the sharp tones that cut deeper than steel, but also the rare kindnesses. Maria's warm smile, Carlos's steady hands helping carry groceries, Lisa's gentle laughter. Those fragments kept her tethered to the world, fragile threads woven through the tapestry of her life. A faint smile tugged at her lips, tinged with irony. The quiet ones, she thought, were often the loudest beneath the surface. Her fingers traced the silver ring on her hand, a token from a past love, imperfect and enduring. It was a reminder that even broken things held stories. That strength often grew from the cracks. Outside, the murmur of voices drifted in, snippets of conversations she could barely grasp. People spoke of sympathy and scandal, of power and reputation. But Athena focused inward, drawing strength from the stillness she had fought to preserve. She thought of Michael, their private vows, the sanctuary they built away from prying eyes. His faith in her had been a quiet revolution, a force that reshaped her understanding of worth and belonging. Her eyes opened, clear and steady now. The sting of the slap had faded, but the fire it ignited within had only grown brighter. Athena wasn't just a silent witness anymore. She was a voice rising from the quiet corners, ready to be heard. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Tears not of defeat, but of release. The first tear fell, then another, and soon they traced a path of resilience across her face. Somewhere in that quiet room, Athena embraced the truth she had, long denied. Strength wasn't always loud, but it was undeniable. And this was only the beginning. The sterile chill of the courtroom was a world apart from the warmth of the manor's golden light. Here, Athena faced a different kind of stage, one not lit by chandeliers, but by harsh fluorescent bulbs that revealed every imperfection. Rows of wooden benches stretched before her, filled with faces she barely knew, some sympathetic, others coldly calculating. The heavy oak judge's bench loomed ahead, an altar of justice that promised fairness, yet carried the weight of countless human dramas. Michael sat steadfast by her side, a pillar of calm in the storm. His presence was a silent vow. She was not alone. As the proceedings began, Athena felt the familiar ache of scrutiny. Lawyers wove words like weapons, dissecting her past, questioning motives, painting her in shades of doubt. The room seemed to shrink, every whispered insinuation echoing louder than intended. Yet within her, a quiet fire burned. She met accusations not with anger, but with a steady gaze that spoke volumes. Her silence was no longer retreat. It was resolve. Between testimonies, memories surfaced unbidden. The laughter lost to time, the tender moments stolen by circumstance, the resilience forged in solitude. Each recollection was a thread in the tapestry of her life, woven tightly against the cold fabric of judgment. Michael's legal team moved with precision, unveiling evidence not just of assault, but of character, exposing Helen's history of disdain and entitlement. The courtroom, once a place of cold procedure, began to pulse with the undercurrent of truth. Outside the courtroom's walls, the world waited. Media whispers transformed into headlines. Strangers saw Athena not as a shadow but as a symbol. In a quiet moment, Athena caught Michael's eye. No words were needed. A shared understanding that this battle was as much about dignity as it was about justice. As the day wore on, fatigue crept in, but so did hope. Each statement, each piece of evidence chipped away at the walls built by prejudice. The courtroom was a crucible, and Athena emerged not broken but reforged, stronger, clearer, unstoppable. In the shadows of law and human frailty, a revolution stirred quietly. The revolution of a woman who refused to be silenced. The days that followed the courtroom drama unfolded like ripples on a still pond, subtle shifts that grew louder with each passing moment. In the quiet corners of the neighborhood, conversations once filled with judgment now bore traces of doubt and reflection. The whispers that had once alienated Athena began to change their tone, evolving from scorn to hesitant sympathy. Helen found herself isolated in a social web she had once controlled. Invitations she once took for granted no longer arrived, and familiar faces looked away when she entered a room. The power she wielded dissolved, replaced by an uneasy silence that echoed louder than any voice. Across the building's halls, Athena noticed the change, not in grand gestures but in the small acts that signaled shifting tides. Neighbors who had once avoided her now offered smiles that lingered a moment longer, nods that carried new respect. Maria's presence was steady, a quiet beacon of support that reminded Athena she was not alone in this journey. Lisa's visits became more frequent, her apologies heartfelt, and accompanied by tears that spoke of genuine regret. But the true measure of change lay in the community's awakening, a collective questioning of assumptions long held sacred. At tea, small gathering in the local cafe, voices rose not in accusation but in conversation. Stories were shared, wounds acknowledged, and bridges tentatively rebuilt. Athena listened, her heart swelling with cautious hope. She had become more than a victim. She was a catalyst for reflection and transformation. Yet beneath the surface, Athena carried her own uncertainties. The path to healing was uneven, marked by moments of doubt and fatigue. But each step forward was a testament to her resilience, a declaration that wounds could heal and scars could become strength. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of amber and rose, Athena stood by her window, watching the city breathe in twilight. Her reflection in the glass was not the shadow she once knew, but a woman illuminated by the quiet light of change. And as the echoes of yesterday's judgments faded, a new melody began, a song of hope, courage, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. The courtroom's verdict arrived on a gray morning, the sky heavy with low-hanging clouds that seemed to mirror the gravity of the moment. Athena stood outside the courthouse, the weight of weeks of tension pressing down on her shoulders. Her breath came steady, measured, a quiet defiance against the storm of uncertainty. As the judge's voice echoed through the chamber, delivering a decision that affirmed not just her innocence but her dignity, A breath she hadn't realized she was holding escaped in a long, trembling sigh. Michael's hand found hers, fingers warm and grounding, an anchor in the whirlwind of emotions. Around them a crowd gathered, friends, neighbors, strangers drawn by the tale of resilience that had unfolded. The world, it seemed, was beginning to see her, not as a shadow cast by silence, but as a beacon of strength. The aftermath was a gentle unfolding, like sunlight filtering through cracks in the pavement. Doors once closed to Athena now opened, tentative but sincere. Apologies were whispered, conversations sought, and bridges mended with cautious hands. Yet the path forward was not without its challenges. Athena knew that scars, though healing, carried their own stories, reminders of pain endured and battles fought. In the quiet moments that followed, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey, from the silent corners of her small apartment to the grand halls where she had reclaimed her voice. She thought of Helen, now a figure diminished by her own actions, and of the complex tapestry of human flaws and redemption. Forgiveness was not yet hers to give, but understanding, a deeper, harder-earned grace, began to take root. At home, Michael awaited with a dinner table set simply but thoughtfully, a sanctuary built not on extravagance, but on love and mutual respect. As they shared a meal, the conversation meandered through hopes and fears. Dreams paused and dreams rekindled. Athena spoke softly of the future, not with certainty, but with the quiet courage of one who has faced darkness and chosen to step into the light. Outside, the city pulsed with life, indifferent yet intimate, a reminder that even in the vastness of the world, every story mattered. Athena's gaze lifted to the window, where the last rays of sunlight kissed the horizon. In that fleeting glow, she saw not just the end of a chapter, but the promise of new beginnings. Light seeping through the cracks, illuminating the path ahead. And for the first time in a long time, hope felt like home. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains of Athena's apartment, casting long shadows that danced with the memory of the journey she had traveled. The silence here was no longer an exile, but a sanctuary, a space where wounds could breathe, where scars told stories of survival, not defeat. News of the verdict had spread beyond the walls of the courthouse, reaching ears and hearts Athena never expected to touch. Letters of support arrived, conversations sparked in community halls, and slowly, a quiet revolution began to ripple through the neighborhoods she called home. Athena found herself standing at the center of something larger than a single story, a symbol for the unseen, the unheard, and the underestimated. But she remained humble, aware that true change was a mosaic of countless small acts stitched together by patience and courage. In the days that followed, Athena attended gatherings, where stories like hers were shared and celebrated. She listened as others spoke of their own battles waged in silence, shadows, and solitude. Her voice, once barely a whisper, grew steady and strong. Not because she sought the spotlight, but because she had learned that sometimes the quietest voices carried the deepest truths. She met with Lisa, now a close friend rather than just a neighbor, and together they talked late into the night about healing, forgiveness, and the future. Maria's warm kitchen became a gathering place where kindness was the currency, and every cup of coffee poured was an act of defiance against cruelty. Helen's fall from grace was no longer a public spectacle, but a cautionary tale, a reminder of the cost of arrogance and the price of prejudice. Yet Athena chose compassion over vengeance. She understood that the revolution she sparked was not one of retribution, but of transformation. Standing before a small crowd in the local library, Athena shared her story, not as a victim, but as a witness to the power of resilience and humanity. Her words resonated, weaving through the hearts of those who listened, awakening empathy, inspiring action. As she spoke, the room filled with a palpable sense of hope. The kind born from knowing that justice is not merely a verdict, but a living, breathing promise. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent and eternal. But within its fabric, Athena's quiet revolution had etched a new pattern, one of kindness, dignity, and the relentless pursuit of fairness. And in that pattern, she found her true home. Thank you for joining Athena's journey, a story of resilience, justice, and the power of kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next meaningful and inspiring tales. Here, we share, uplift, and inspire each other every day with stories that matter. See you in the next story, where every moment brings us closer to kindness and fairness.